grab your Beano, Wargamers, because today we are hanging out at the lookout with the beach in the background, and we're talking about a game that my kids thought was completely appropriate for dear old Dad. Of course, I'm referring to Gaslands. I had to explain to them it's not that kind of gas. It's like the gas you put in cars. Yeah, we Wargamers are intellectual types, aren't we? Yeah, we're really super smart, and we're the adults in the room. Got a couple of cars here outside the big box store. Those of you that have followed the channel for a while will recognize my Riotville terrain, which is going to be the scene of a bloodbath and a gas bath too, I suppose. We're gonna do just a real quick kind of a capsule review, not a flip through so much, just as first impressions. Now here's the thing about Gaslands. This is probably the most popular game that I have played, or that I will be playing. I will be doing a game on with Gaslands. And frankly, this is a very popular game. There's a lot of guys, at least on Wargaming YouTube, there are a lot of guys that have games. So you can see exactly how this game plays. You can see for yourself if it's the kind of thing you'd enjoy. What I'm going to be doing is giving kind of a review that is essentially just as much a first impressions and a couple of thoughts on how the game plays, so you can get a feel for it for your own self. And I got to tell you, I think filming this right next to a highway with the cars in the background is perfect. It adds just the right bit of ambiance. Before we talk about Gaslands in particular, I wanted to talk a little bit about car combat games in general. These are a very difficult game to get right. There have been a lot of them over the years, and I don't think any of them have done this genre of miniature war game quite as well as Gaslands. When it comes to car combat games, you might think at a casual glance, they're very similar to space combat games. They're not. The thing with space combat games is that they're very... there's a lot of ways that you can kind of gloss over what's really happening. There are a lot of ways to just kind of create the impression of a space combat game. Most famously, one of my favorite fighter games is Silent Death. And Silent Death says, look, we're not worried about that third dimension. That third dimension just adds complexity that makes the game more complex without really adding anything to it. So you can get away with that kind of oversimplification. Also, raise your hand if you've flown in a spaceship. All right, put your hand down, because I think you're lying. If your hand is up, then I doubt it. However, we all have driver's licenses. We all drive. Some of us more than others, but we all have everyday practical, real experience driving a car. So we know how a car handles. And we expect a game to mimic how the car handles, which means you have to pay very close attention to physics. In space combat games, Laplace, Newton, and Lagrange, they go right out the window. You three eggheads can hit the bricks, because I'm trying to have some fun here, and having to worry about momentum and conservation of mass and fuel and all that, that can overcomplicate things. We tend to ignore them. But when it comes to cars, you can't really do that. We need to worry about acceleration. We know how cars accelerate, particularly with relation to each other. When it comes to collisions, that's something you generally don't have to worry about in space combat games. Space is big. I mean, it's really big. I mean, it is so incomprehensibly big, and I'm doing a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing here, that you don't have to worry so much about ramming. Cars, compared to people, are big and slow, and ramming becomes critical. And not just ramming, but impacts, bouncing off of walls, bouncing off of the big box store, like the one we see here in the back. And how now you need to start worrying about the physics of the cars. You need to worry about, was the impact a glancing blow? Is it three-quarters? Is it head-on? Is it T-bone? What are the relative speeds? What's going to happen after the impact? How is it going to be the angle of impact equals the angle of refraction? And so on. Then you also need to worry about the actual combat itself. When it comes time for pulling the trigger and shooting the guns, you have to worry about, well, I want my guns to feel like they're having an effect on the car I'm shooting at. On the other hand, I don't want it to be too big an effect, because that guy's going to shoot at me. And if it's a simple one and done, I pop you and you're dead, then that creates a very different kind of game that is basically your car is either fine or it's dead. Likewise with ramming. You know, in a lot of games, like many of the Car Wars games were notorious for, don't even bother with the guns, because if you can ram a guy with a ram plate, it's game over for him, and you're probably going to survive and win the game. So how you deal with those two kind of subsystems is vital to making a car combat game that is fun and yet feels like you're pushing cars around the board. And that's, I think, where Gaslands really shines. So here we see one of the first cars that I'm going to be using, and we see how simple the, quote, character record sheet is for the cars. It's got a handling of 4. In other words, some of these cars are going to be much easier to maneuver around the battlefield than others. The hull, 8 hit points. Maximum gear, 6, so we can go really fast. It's got a pretty good handling. And then just 2 simple, right, there's 2 machine guns there, so I gave it a machine gun. Does 2d6 damage. So 1 shot might be enough to knock itself out. 50-50 chance. You'll take damage, it'll mean something, but it's not an instant kill, which is great. It's got a ram, which likewise, see the little ram spike there? Likewise. So it's very simple, very easy to understand, but actually with Gaslands, these hit points are not the primary resource that you're trying to conserve. The primary resource you're trying to conserve is, of course, the hazard markers. Every vehicle can have up to 6 hazard markers, and this is where the genius comes in. We're just going to use the chips for marking the hazard markers, drop them down here. I know Litco makes fancy little triangles, a little exclamation point, bling, for danger, but, you know, I'm cheap. I want to spend my money on other things. I'm going to use yellow chips. The point is, very simple, very easy, not a lot to remember for any individual car, which is great. And then, of course, you have the genius of the turn markers. And it's here that the game really comes into its own. These simple templates handle all of the math for you. And that is great, because it means you can focus on the tactics and not have to spend a whole lot of time worrying about the geometry. You pick your template, you move your dude. The motorcycle comes over here. And these templates, thank you Litco, even have what gear you're allowed to use it. It's got how many hazard tokens you pick up. So here's your little swerve. You start there, you end there. Easy peasy. And the lemon is squeezy. Combine that with the spin out, with the slide. And now when you enter a movement, if you make a little oopsie doopsie, so my car's here, and I roll my dice, and my mice doesn't move the way I want to, while I might not slide to there, I might wind up, I'm facing the wrong direction, but it's not an insurmountable difficulty. All I've done is kind of Tokyo drifted into a new direction. And so on my next turn, I can just drop this down. And yeah, okay, it took me an extra turn to get to where I wanted to go, but hey, that's hardly the end of the world. This is a great, easy to understand, easy to implementation of how you're tracking that danger resource. Absolutely brilliant. I love it. It's really slick. So back to more of a proper review. The art in this book ranges from the typical Osprey, fantastic. The painted work here is really evocative. You know, we all recognize the Trans Am here, and it gives you that science fiction flair that it takes place in a near future. The miniature stuff, this doesn't do a whole lot for me, to be honest with you. It shows you what's possible. It shows you what you can do. But any given YouTuber has a setup that is on par with this. It's not bad. It does the job, but it's not up to the usual Osprey 9 out of 10. It's about a 5, maybe a 6. But again, they favor that grim and gritty dark future that just doesn't appeal to me. I got a grim and gritty enough present. You know what I'm saying? The actual writing itself is very easy breezy, easy to understand, very clear. The inclusion of plenty of diagrams to walk you through all this stuff is much appreciated. And then just, you know, as a by the way, if you don't want to bother with creating a world in which cars fight each other, I mean, honestly, you don't need excuses. Cars with guns on them sell themselves. Hey, there's cars, you've got cars, let's go crash them against each other. It was fine when we were 5-year-olds in the sandbox. It's fine when we're 45-year-olds around the wargaming table. Osprey has done, and I should probably point out this is written by Mike Hutchinson. Thank you, Mike. It also includes a kind of background, and you don't use points, you use cans because I guess that's flavor. And they've got teams for you that, here's the team from the Wasteland. They're called Team Slimer, which, I mean, to me, a desert wasteland is more of a dry thing, and slime, I don't know. It just doesn't do much for me. There's a whole thing about Mars, and one team is very technically sound, and I mean, that's fine. I guess some people really like it, but like I said, I don't need that. I'm even thinking about, and I didn't see any rules in here. Maybe there is in Gaslands Reloaded, or Refueled, or Unleaded, whatever it's called. They have a lot of stuff at Gaslands.com. Fairly good support for this game. But, the one thing I didn't see is rules for pedestrians. I honestly think that I may wind up having a Mondo game and just giving a bunch of pedestrians handguns and Molotov cocktails. And we'll see how many mobs can take on a couple of dueling cars. In fact, maybe we'll even be able to do like a fun little three-way where two cars are engaged in a duel that gets interrupted by those darn dirty townies from Mondo. Hey, there's some old school car combat charm for you. If you know what Mondo is, then, I should say, if you know what it is, boy, you're in the right place, or you watching the right YouTube channel. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. Mondo Car Wars. Good stuff. It's a part of your gaming heritage. You should probably know these things. It's part of your cultural literacy. There's your homework for the week for cultural literacy. Learn what Car Wars is in Mondo. M-O-N-D-O. It's an acronym, I can tell you that. Here we go. Here's some more of that great artwork. Just Say No to Crack. I don't know why. That amuses me. One of the other things I should touch on is that the inclusion of ready-made cars for you is it's a bit redundant. The vehicle construction for this game is really easy. And again, the actual construction of the vehicles, there's a lot of balancing factors that you need to include. Armor versus weapons versus speed versus handling. There's a lot that goes into that. And some games can get bogged down. Now, to be fair, the old Car Wars game, that was a game in its own right. Vehicle design was a game within the game. And back in the day, I spent hours and hours just tweaking car designs and making car designs. That's how we solo game. We built characters. And when I say characters, of course, I also mean cars. You've got a lot of options here for weapons, and you've got a lot of different vehicle types to choose from. And the system for constructing your own car is easy to understand, easy to implement. What's not to like? Why would you need to run pre-built cars when you can design your own, particularly given that the game is designed to be used with your own Matchbox cars? It would not be hard to grab a VW Beetle, glue some plastic on there, and just a little straw, just a little coffee stirrer straw. Man, I'm telling you, $1 for the vehicle, $1 for glue, and then you can just cut up a cereal pack and steal a coffee stirrer from the office or from your local Starbucks. Glue that on there, and you are done. Little paint, little black paint, a little bit of silver paint. That's we've talked about that before. Everybody likes black and silver. I kind of like this. Look at those bright colors. Little Necromunda flare there for you. You can see somebody driving around this in the Underhive, can't you? Anyway, that's, car design itself is super easy in the land of gas. So, high recommend on this. I'm looking forward to finally taking it out for a spin. Ha! See what I did there? I started with a dad joke, and I ended with a dad joke. And I'm also going to call it quits right there because I sense a ramble coming on. Thanks for watching this kind of light and easy capsule review of Gaslands, and help, whether you think you'd like it or not, giving you some impressions of it. Until next time, guys, you know what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be preparing for the big game, and I'm also going to be praying for you.